send out the last batch.
And is it, when people arrive today, is it easier just to let them in? Is it easier to kind of just take off the, you know, the block thing, so they just join when they join rather than you have to let them in? Is that difficult or easy, or?
I'll have to remove the option of waiting room then.
I only wonder if it was easier for you, just to sort of let people in without having to try too hard.
Let me remove the waiting room option.
I'm going to try and, how can I change? How can I do? Let's try that one, and I can see. I'm trying to just change the view to maybe gallery so I can see some other people coming in. I'll put it on gallery mode. Hopefully that will help. Is how many people have we got coming today, Vivian?
The attendees on LinkedIn were a bit low for this week. There's 30 people registered, but the thing about sending out reminders is that you send out to both people that registered in previous weeks. So just in case they want to attend a new one.
Okay. I've already put it on record, so then I don't have to do it in a minute. We just have to take out the first 15 minutes or something, shall we? That'd be easy, won't it? What's this? What's this, number 4 or 5, do you think?
What
is this, number 4 or 5 now? I can't remember.
5.
I've got to work out how can I share? Where's share? Vivian, can I ask, can you see the slides?
No, I can't.
Neither can I. Can you see them now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, let's see where we get to. Actually, I'll go and get my phone, and then if you need to WhatsApp me during the session, I can I can have it on. Just in case. So what's the bet? Let's have a guess at numbers. What do you reckon? 6 people will turn up? So we have a guess. Let's have a bet.
Hopefully more than that. Because on my list here for the registrants, with the previous weeks, I have like 184 people that have registered for the event before. So I've sent out reminders to all of them, plus the people that's registered for this week. And hopefully more than that. Fingers crossed.
All right, Vivian.
Because this week's poll was like this week's
poll was quite good. Was I don't know how many people got. It was really interesting responses actually.
Yeah.
Not what I thought it would be. I really didn't think it would be that.
Few people that-
Pardon?
have
Oh, you've
conversation
gone.
because
You're. I think yours. No, I think your signal's gone. Hello, Vivian. Where are you?
can you hear me now?
You're back.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Vivian. You disappeared for a while. I want you back, baby. I want you back. I've gone mad. I've
Is
gone
there, I'll
absolutely.
say maybe after this call, we'll
Can I
probably have
can I just
another
say
call.
something? My slides are better than yours, aren't they? My slides are superb, Vivian. Don't you think? Look, I did that all on my own.
Okay, but with my template stuff.
No, no, no. I did it all on my own. You don't take any credit. No, once you've got templates, it's actually much easier for me just to add bits rather than asking you to do it. Do you know what I mean? It just because
Yeah.
you've already done the majority of the stuff. It's easy for me just to chuck stuff in, isn't it? So if you think I'm not asking you, it's because I think, well, I'll just do that. And I did those, and they're not lined up very well, though, are they? But I did those on the right. But there's gaps. Can you see the gaps aren't even like there between leading
I can't see
cognitively?
your slide, right?
You can't see what?
Okay, we're back to the slide for a bit. It's back. So in 5 minutes, we'll be on.
Right, I'm gonna get a drink. I've got my phone on if you need me. I hope we could get a couple. I hope we get some interesting people because this is really interesting.
Yeah. What?
This piece, this bit about cognition is really interesting.
Okay.
Even though I say so myself.
Hope we do. So
1, 2, 3,
in
4, 5.
this 5 minutes, I'm going to send out the last batch of reminders and we'll wait for them. So I removed the option of waiting room. So whenever someone logs on, they'll come in immediately. Is that okay?
Yeah, well, I wonder if it was just easier to do, just so that you don't have to sit and think about it, because we're not talking. It's not like a private meeting, is it? So we're not talking about anything. I mean, as long as somebody doesn't bomb us and come running in, I've never seen. I've never seen, but apparently other people have. They've said they've had some random people arrive on groups before, but I'm not too worried about that. There's nothing here that's sensitive information, is it? But
Mhm.
at least they can then just join, and you haven't got to worry. Oh no, right. Do you let John in or do I need to let John in? I can't, Vivian, I can't hear you.
I said, let me log into your account so you don't have to worry about letting people in.
Yeah,
I'll do the letting in.
I can't do that as well as other stuff. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, let me log into.
There's a couple of people in there. Alex is in there. Are you okay, Vivian, to let everybody in? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, if I'm to let people in, I have to be the host. So I'll reclaim being host.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Does that mean I can still share?
Yeah. Okay, no, don't worry. I think they're in already.
No worries, thanks.
Mm.
Hi, Alex, how are you?
There we go.
There you go, you're on.
My camera wasn't popped up.
All right.
Pesky camera.
So I need to keep, I think we'll try and keep people on mute unless we're talking, keep on mute because we've had a real, I've got it now, we get a really weird, we get a really weird sort of background noise. I think sometimes with some of the microphones on. Brad, how are you? Mark, how are you? Oh, nice thumb, Mark. Brilliant. You're a technical genius.
I don't know about that, but thank you and hello to everybody.
Brad, are you well?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Really good to
Good.
be here.
Excellent.
How are you?
Good. Which part of the world are you in?
I'm in the UK at the moment,
Cool.
just in a little village outside of Newbury.
Oh, very posh.
Don't know about that.
Oh no, I was speaking to somebody the other day. Their property backs onto the race course, so they get kind of free views of the racing up there. Apparently, it's amazing.
Yeah. I've never been before, but yeah, I know the place well.
I sometimes do a bit of work up there for one of the car companies. It was Marshall Motor Group. I forget what they've been bought out since. I can't remember what they're called, but sometimes pop up to Newbury. Okay, how are we doing for time? Because we're up to in service of those that have arrived. It's 12:01. Maybe just another minute or so, and then we'll kick off if that's okay with everyone. Vivian, how are we doing on guests today?
I have let all of them in. Basically, I
Fabulous.
removed the waiting room option. So once they join, they're joining
Brilliant.
directly.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Vivian. Okay, well, it's just a couple of minutes past 12, so let's sort of loosely start, and then we'll see where we get to. So, for those of you who haven't joined before, the Leadership Lab is really just a platform, if you like, for a bunch of us to get together and think about leadership issues in today's somewhat challenging environment, where there are plenty of opportunities to flourish for those who can identify and take advantages of those. And so I hope this, as we continue to become more of a collaborative platform. I think if anybody's got their microphone on, can you turn it off? I've got a really weird sort of background noise. I'm not sure what's happening. It's just me who can hear it, but thank you. So just to help us navigate change, when we started in the first one, we were talking about that notion of change as a skill. There's so much happening in the world today, and the better that we as leaders can help navigate change, understand it, deliver it, engage others in it, then using change as a competitive advantage. And so that's the backdrop for a number of these things. I've been roughly, loosely in this field for 20 something years. And what fascinates me is still the people issue. So even in this digital first world, how important things like relationships are, network communication, this notion of collaboration, for example. And today we're going to look at a specific piece within that, which personally I'm fascinated with, and there's such value in it. And this is this notion of cognition. And so I wonder, just first off is, and if anybody wants to just kind of put their hand up or unmute and then come in, but what do we understand by cognition, number one? And number two, why should we care about it? And of course, in time-honored fashion, if you don't, I'm going to ask somebody like Brad and say, should we talk about cognition, Brad? Or Mark, do you want to come in? Tell us about the notion of cognition. What do we understand by it or think about it?
I'm happy to jump in. Yeah, it's
Thank
a really
you.
interesting word, really, that I haven't spent too much time reflecting on. But for me, it's the mental processes, it's the thinking, it's the rational side. The logic and the data I would have put into the cognition space.
And I think it's because we've got so much, there's so much knowledge, creativity and information within people in our business. And I've just put up a slide here, look, that the mental action of acquiring information, of making sense of it, of doing something with it, of adding up that, if you like, it's almost sort of science and intuition combined to give us real value in the business. Now, there are various stats out there. One is it's something like between 30 to 50%. People are able to offer the business between 30 to 50% of their knowledge, creativity, and experience, if you like, which means that something like 50 to 70% is untapped in the business. So if we can access that, it makes a huge difference to the business. Back in the end of the 1900s, we had Taylorism as a way of business improvement. Mid 1900, 1950, late 1800s, late 19th century. Taylorism, mid 1900s, 1950, 1960, behaviorism with Easton. And now I really think we're in this place of cognition. Many of the old business development models or business improvement models we had, they don't deliver the value that they used to. And the space to move into now is this mental process piece. How can we acquire knowledge? How can we connect people with ideas to improve or develop business or to deliver change, whatever that subject is? And so when we think about cognition, I guess today I was going to just split it up loosely into two areas. One is just thinking about us as leader and our ability to think cognitively or to behave, to perhaps make more sense of, and to get more value from us as leaders cognitively. And this is the MIT model. It used to be 4 capabilities of leadership. For those who recognize it, they've recently changed it to the 5. So when I was at school, it was 4 capabilities, and now it's 5. So we used to look at it is visioning, relating, inventing, and sense making. Now, of course, sense making is about how are we as leaders gathering information from the world? How are we making sense of the world today? If we're doing that individually, then that's going to be a very limited view. We know that. So we need to think about how do we gather not just our view of the world, but others. How can we include those? What are they seeing in the world? How can we tap into that? And that might mean as a leader that we use advisors. We spend time with customers, clients, those who are experiencing the world so that we can make sense of it and therefore use it within our visioning. What's our future purpose? What are we going to be doing in the future? What space are we going to hold? What ideas are we going to have? How do we relate to that? But also, how do we relate, or how do we develop our relationships within that? And interestingly, at MIT, when I did a few bits and pieces there, they're really strong on visioning, sense making, and inventing, come up with new ideas. They're not particularly strong by their own admittance on relationships and the softer sort of skills stuff, which are quite interesting to hear. So when we think of cognition, so this idea of gathering information, making sense of it, and I genuinely think it's one of my roles in business, is to connect people and ideas, connect people and knowledge, so they can make sense of it and be more efficient and effective. Now, for those who have joined before, I've mentioned our 5-step process called EXACT to help customers move more efficiently and effectively through change, and therefore move faster to value, saving time and money, and tipping the likelihood of success in their favor. We know that change is difficult, expensive, risky, emotional, and failure intensive, but it doesn't have to be that way. And the reason I say it doesn't have to be that way is because there's so much knowledge in the business. If we could tap into that, you immediately tip the balance of success in your favor. I go back to that piece about between 50 and 70% of knowledge, creativity, and ideas in the business remains untapped. And personally, I think that's almost a criminal waste. But if we think about cognition as a whole, if you look at the first 3 steps of EXACT, cognition is in there. It may not be overtly mentioned, but it's in there. So the first part, E, envision the future, gathering people together to consider what the future looks like and what our space in the future might be. What will business look like in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time? What will our position be? What will customers and clients want? What will they be doing? And we do that by asking, or you can do that by asking people, tapping into the knowledge and creativity in this business and combining it to develop a view of the future. The second part is to understand where you currently are. And if we know where we are, then we can create a strategy or a plan to move from here to there. And then we need to look at the gaps. How big is the gap? Is it a small step? Is it a big step? Yeah. Do we know a lot about it? Do we know a little about it? And again, that's that cognition piece. What knowledge do we have in the business? Because if you get to step 2 and you think, well, as director, I think this is an easy step. I think it's quite a short journey. If you're wrong and you don't invest properly and the rest of the business thinks it's a big step, then likelihood is you will not be successful, certainly not in the time or manner you would want to be anyway. The third step, A, attention, this is what we talked about last week, is what are the potential risks or hurdles to you delivering this strategy? And when we look at, this is not about a risk register. So it's not about directors saying, well, it's Brexit, it's flooding, it's the exchange rate, it's the impending election. It's a much broader and balanced view of risk in the business. And again, this is about tapping into the cognition in the business and saying, you tell us what ideas, what knowledge have you got? And then making sense of it so that as leaders, you can pay attention to what needs your attention in order to deliver change more efficiently and effectively, and in essence, improve the economics of change. So if we just think about step 3 just for a moment, attention, this is the slide I showed last week. This is from a real client. So this is cognition or leading cognitively in real life, in action. So we went to 15 people in the business for step 3, where where's the attention in the business, and we interviewed people and said, hey, what are the potential hurdles to the business delivering this change or project, on time, in budget, or whatever the specific question was. And they came up with 300 or 400 hurdles, which when we looked at it really became 52, and these are the 52. You can see the numbers here, and the reason it's useful is if you look on the left hand side, you can see number 45. So the grey risk, the grey line is the degree to which the business is prepared for or understands the risk, and the orange line going top left to bottom right is the significance of that risk. And I've sorted them in order of significance for you, so they go top left to bottom right. So for example, number 45, the most important risk, number 15, 16, something like that, the least, I think it's 15, one of those, the least important when it comes to hurdles, least important risk, least likely to slow or derail the business. But the second part is, and if you look at just number 23, for example, or number 26, these are, as I've just drawn little red lines, you can see they're very important. They're scoring 80, 90 plus in terms of significance. And yet 26, 0, the least prepared, the business is least prepared to deal with this. Now, if you look at the size of that gap, that's a gap that needs closing. That's a gap that desperately needs closing. On the right-hand side, which I've circled yellow, you'll see a whole bunch of risks. Doesn't matter what they are, but number 40, number 41, number 2, number 15. These are not. They're way, way above the orange line. These are getting way more attention than they need to, and are unlikely to slow or derail. They're important. It's not about paying no attention, but they're receiving too much attention. Perhaps you needed to pay attention to them 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, or perhaps they're things you like paying attention to. All we're saying is do less of the stuff on the right and take that time and energy and focus it on the left-hand side. But we've gathered this information from the knowledge in the business. We're not making it up. Yeah. So there's huge knowledge. So the business is saying, people in business are saying, hey, we need to do more of this. We need to do, less of that, in order to close the gap and move faster to value. So that's cognition in action in the business. So let's ask another question, and I'd really like your thoughts on this. Has anybody, do you know of, or has anybody used open space as a form for running meetings or problem solving? Brad's nodding. Anybody else? Alex, is that a nod? I can't see, sorry. Anyone else used open space? Brad, do you want to pop on and talk a bit about open space? I think you're nodding, sir. It's a very small screen.
Yeah. In its simplest form, the way I've used open space is when you've got a large group gathering, is to provide the space for people to select what it is that they want to talk about, discuss, have a conversation about, and then set up separate zones within the room. And each zone then hosts a container for a conversation, and then people can then move to the different conversations, the different containers with their feet, i.e. when they're ready. There's no sort of start and end to your movement per se. You move when you feel you've contributed as much as you can, or you maybe got bored and want to try and see what's going on in another conversation. So the principle that I've worked with is that essentially the room has the knowledge, has the ideas, and by mixing the relationships that people have, the creativity is sparked, really, because there's no formal structure other than the container of the space that people can work within.
Brilliant. And that's why Brad, that's why I like open space and why I encourage people to use it, because it allows, it believes in or trusts that the information that's required, the knowledge is in the room. And I think open space is a great way of connecting people and ideas to solve problems. In other words, it taps into that cognition piece. It says, what knowledge, ideas do you have? How can we connect them? How can we make sense of them? How can we improve business using this? And I just think it's so exciting, and it's really cheap. So you get huge engagement, fabulous outputs cheaply, and you can do it just for your business, or you could gather, for example, a mixed group of people. You could customers, clients, suppliers, some of your staff, people from other industries, consultants, and discuss a topic. But it's tapping into, and this is the key part really for me, as Brad said, it lacks for some of us, or structure, which means it allows for free thinking and a lot more ownership and responsibility from the people in the room, because they talk about what they want to talk about. Now, look, I've been in the business for 20 years plus of facilitating meetings, but very often, we're asked by customers, these are the things we want to discuss, these are the topics, and it's standard facilitator led. Out come the 4 flip charts with the 4 questions on, or the 4 topics, and off people go to do it. And it's reasonably efficient and effectively. Some of us on this call have made plenty of money, by doing it over the years. But I think just open space goes to the next level, because apart from asking the initial question, for example, how do we improve this business? Or how do we become the number one business for staff to join us? How do we improve our recruitment? It's up then to the people in the room to solve that. And it really, really taps into that knowledge and creativity piece. Okay. So if we just go
Can I
back
ask-
to, go on,
Could I
hello.
ask just on a hello everybody, just on a practical aspect of your open space,
Yes,
how are
MJ.
you capturing all the lovely stuff
Great.
that is
So-
and making it the kind of hive mind, so that it's easy
Yeah.
to go into it afterwards and go, actually they weren't in the same groups together, but there's lots of the similar ideas floating
Yeah, so
around.
if you
joining
different
the
ways,
dots.
thank you, different ways of doing it. So what would normally happen is if you've got, we normally have like a meeting room board or an agenda board which just says, look, you know, at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock, you know, it's called a marketplace, but you put up groups and slots, and you put the specific question or theme that group wants to get together and talk. And we ask each group to flip chart what they've talked about. So you capture those notes, and quite often I would have somebody with a little laptop just transposing those notes into some form of document that people can get in the end of the day. And if we can't do it quick enough, MJ, then we would email it out afterwards. What can also so that captures that conversation. Now, if somebody moves from group to group, you won't capture that. You know, Alex, for example, on this call, if she's gone to 2 or 3 groups, it won't capture that. It will only capture the outputs or the discussion or the ideas from that particular group, and you'll put somebody loosely as a facilitator to guide that group. What can be interesting, if you go and do say 5, 10 or 20, I don't know, open space programs or days across the country, just as an example, asking the same question, of course you can gather information from all those groups. Some of it will overlap, but what you shouldn't do if you follow open space is dictate what people talk about. You ask the same question and then see what people come up with, and you could look for themes over 5, 10, 20 sessions, for example. So you got 50 people, 100 people in a room. I know there have been sessions run for many hundreds. I've never done that. 50, 60, 70 people is very doable. And then you run a dozen sessions and find out what the themes are. MJ, have I answered your question? 1, 2, does it make sense?
Yes, you have, very much so. Thank you. Yes, it makes sense. So I only asked because I was on a call with BDO, and they used something which I'd seen but not used, which is called Menti.com.
Oh yeah.
And MENTI, I don't know if you've used or seen it.
Yeah.
That very quickly, I mean, it was instant. They asked questions, we all put in our thing all over the world, and it very quickly word clouded the topics of the day. It was fascinating.
I think Menti is really simple for just gathering stuff quickly, getting ideas, especially for online, or actually even people in the room. If you want to keep your ideas perhaps private, one of the great things with coming together, I think, with open spaces, you have those conversations. And we often joke, and I'm going to come to Brad in a second, but sorry, this wasn't about selling open space. I'm just selling, but it's just showing. But what I love about open space is if you start, I know, 10 o'clock-ish, what we notice is about 1 o'clock, the proverbial, ties get loosened and the jackets come off and people go, right, now let's really start sharing. And I'm not sure that happens through things like Menti. It's absolutely useful. It's great for gathering data specifics, but open space is much more about opening it up. MJ, thank you. Can I go to Brad? Your hand was up, sir.
It was really a curiosity that I'm holding that maybe somebody in the room has got a perspective on. The open space technology, I think, is so useful, as you've said, PJ, around the cognition, around raising the hive mind, Mark, you called it the collective. And I'm sort of sitting with this notion of that unlocks subjective truths amongst each individual that through conversations may create a normative truth of what's going on, which is all good. But at the same time, there's not necessarily any data to make sure that the conversations have moved in the right direction for the problem that needs to be solved. So people can then, how do you protect against people going off and thinking they've solved something, which is good for the energy in the group, they've got some at the end of it, but actually it's not going to improve the business because it's not the biggest issue we need to solve.
Yes.
And I suppose the one point is trying to mitigate against the right questions in the beginning, but when people get going and they create their own environment, you could lose track of kind of where they've ended up. And I just wondered if you, PJ, if anybody else got any views on, I suppose, how to make sure you blend the data of what's actually happening versus the truth that people through an open space technology can create for themselves.
Before I step in, has anybody else got a view, please? Brad, thank you so much. Has anybody else got a view on that if you've experienced open space? Have a click through, see who's on. So there's any hands waving. So so my experience, if I can just help with my experience of that, is one is it's important in the setup, the question you ask, and in the initial sort of introductory circle, how you offer the question, and then how you set up for the day to some degree will mitigate that. Sometimes, I say, we in the true sense of open space, we kind of shouldn't get involved. But quite often, if I'm running it, usually I run it with 2 people, so we can just pop into groups and just check. You know, sometimes you have to have like a little thermometer or a little check-in. Sometimes have a check-in before lunch just to see how people were doing, because you're right, they can run off and solve things that don't necessarily need to be solved. However, if they're solving, you could argue if they're solving something, networking, they're creating relationships and doing something, there is value in that. It might not be the question, or it might not be the one the business asks. I mean, you can always preload the morning, or you can, towards the end of the afternoon, you can always, you know, once people have got really creative and the relationships have been addressed, no point saying, right, you know, for the last hour, we have been asked by the business to address this point. What do you think? Because I think we have to use open space, if you like, usefully and commercially for the business. But not normally. Usually the point gets covered, and I sort of say the value will come from, if they don't solve the question, they might solve a number of issues around it. So the value is still high. But yes, if it hasn't got the answer, then sometimes we have to be a little bit less subtle, if that's okay. And we find a way of doing that. But primarily should be participant led. Okay, so just moving on just a little bit. If we just go back to our 5-step process, the first 3 have cognition built in, if you like. The 4th is blatantly about, you know, it's overtly cognition, is saying, if you know what the view of the future is, you know where you're starting from, you have the plan, you know what the hits and hurdles are, we know what the hurdles are likely to be, the pitfalls. Therefore, how are we going to solve these together? How are we going to behave in a way that greatly improves the likelihood of us being successful? What are we going to do? What knowledge have we got in the business to make this shift? And this is the cognition piece. Are we going to have meetings? Are we going to run open space? Is there any training or coaching that's going to be required? Do we have any skills gaps, knowledge gaps? I know we've got Alex on the phone, who's big on the call, who's big on knowledge gaps, particularly in digital transformation. Is how do you bridge that gap? Is it through training? Is it through buying people in? Is it through, but it's still about the knowledge. It's still about acquiring the knowledge. Does the business have the knowledge, or do we need to go out and buy the knowledge? And what I think is fascinating here is there's ambition or knowledge in the business that the business doesn't understand, doesn't know exists, and that's what we want to access first. Because it's cheaper, it's much better value for the business, and I do believe if you can, in developing people in the business who are already you know, passionate about your business and who have that loyalty. And of course, if you have to buy in, and of course, if you have to train specifically, you go and train specifically. And the training piece also fits into things like the Oxygen report, you know, which we know about, Google's Oxygen report, training, developing, being interested in other people. So leading as coach rather than leading as expert. Yeah. So this piece for me, I think, is fabulously exciting. And I think we're in that age where we've leaned lots of things, we've agiled lots of things. Yeah, great. And we've had various processes, say, like Taylorism, like behaviorism. But the place to go is this wonderful thing between our ears. So listen, that's me. I hope that's helpful, talking about cognition. Next time we're talking about coaching, which we alluded to today, leader as coach, and that to show that shift from leader as expert to leader as coach. And also the broader things about how to create coaching conversations, or perhaps a performance coaching culture. You know, what is coaching, what isn't coaching? And it is quite a shift for people, because many leaders have got where they've got, you know, they've got their salary, they've got their role, they've got their position from being expert. Now, linked on from cognition is we can't expect experts, we can't expect leaders to know it all. We have to tap into the expertise in the business, hence the cognition. So how do we lead cognitively, and how do we lead as coach rather than lead as expert? So that's my bit done for today. Let's open it up to the floor. Let me stop sharing. Stop sharing. So thoughts, views, questions, what do we think? A few minutes to share your ideas or experiences on cognition, connecting, problem solving together. What do you think?
Well, I do like a flip chart, and I do like holding the pen, and coming back to your next week's call about being, not necessarily the expert lead, the coaching lead. It's too easy, I've found, to drive the conversation and not be kind of disinterested in the classic sense of the word. I've found that difficult because you've always got these subjective thoughts in your head about what you've got from being expert, if you like, in this.
Yeah.
Stepping away from that, I've sometimes found difficult to just be the facilitator and not the person that can see the end result that they want and steer the people in that general direction. So if there's any thoughts on how best to distance oneself from the process.
While someone's thinking about that, can I tell you a funny story from a few years ago, pre-COVID? I went to Switzerland. So a guy from an oil company in Switzerland paid me to go out and facilitate a morning session for his team. There's only about 12 people. MJ only about 12, I think, but it was quite funny. So it was on, by the way, I should just say, it was reason it was a bit naughty. It was a Thursday morning because I then knew I could stay Friday, Saturday, Sunday and go skiing. So I'd just make the most of it if I've gone that far. But he paid me for the morning, and it was fascinating. He said he wanted some ideas for this particular, I suppose, change. And no problem at all, went out for a couple of hours. And when I arrived at 9 o'clock, he introduced me and he made a big fuss about the investment he'd made in flying me out, which I thought was quite interesting. And then if you imagine, he was sort of saying, I want to know what the answer is. It doesn't matter. What color are we going to paint this room? Doesn't matter, right? And I want you to come up with the best answer, and I'm going to leave you for a couple of hours. And then before he walked out, he said, and just so you know, I think the best answer is red. See you later. Thanks, Alex. The best answer is red. And you think, well, and he walked out and the group went, there you go. The answer's red. It doesn't matter what we do. He's already decided. And it was funny. We worked quite hard together and came up with a different answer, which was blue. And we shared it with him, and he told us we were wrong and fired me. Which was just absolutely genius. So in terms of, it is hard. Or I guess what am I doing? It was really hard for him to let go, and the result was the result. But I think there's people struggling with this leadership wise. I think it's a really good point. Is when to tell, when to direct, when to coach, when to inform, when to. It's not as easy as one or the other. Brad, what's your thoughts on that? Perhaps the leadership continuum or the coaching continuum, when to and when not to.
I don't really have a fully formed thought in it. I was curious. I'm still thinking about, about the question around stepping into the space or not into the space. If I was to offer one thought, really, it would be around the power of the conversation. I'm a real believer in shared meaning making and shared sense making, and I think in a highly complex world, to believe that you've got the answer is a little bit naive, really. To think that everything's exactly the same as it was the last time you tried it and nothing's changed, therefore the answer must be the same, I think it's definitely worth exploring, right? And sometimes it might be, right? But if there are, then I think you're dealing with simple problems. It's like, they're not sort of problems that would require sort of mature leadership. It might just be, tactical leadership, which might be then falling into your management space. Do X and you'll get Y. That might be predictable. I suppose the more complex the leadership gets, I think you just can't hold the view that all the answers.
Actually, that's a good point. That the straightforward stuff, okay, yeah. But I think when it gets more complex, or when there might be different answers, it's not black and white. That's when I think I said that having the conversation, or the number of conversations, having open space, just as an example, gives us, I mean, open space works really well, I think, when it's about complexity. If it's a straightforward answer, you just say, listen, have the meeting and, and sort it, as you say, if it's leadership or management. The more complex it gets, I think then this cognition piece becomes more valuable. Brad, thank you. John, what's your thoughts on cognition, connecting people and ideas?
Hi, Vijay. I think, my background is very inclusive of all of the people in all of the problem solving. And whilst we may talk about cognition and other words that we want to put on it over the years, much of the management styles over the years have only followed on with different words attached. And yes, we've got an option to go into open space or many other styles of meetings where you can break off into groups. But if I work with teams, which is what I generally do rather than trying to take on the world, I don't think trying to make things more difficult than they are is the right way to go. I'm very focused, extremely focused on a process very similar to yours, which I think I'll probably do in on. Which breaks down the fundamentals of the people, the problems, where we are now, where we go. Nothing has changed for me over the years, except that I give all of the chances to all of the people in the group that I'm working with. And I give it away, literally give it away to the people. So the first thing that we do is set up an understanding of how the group works if I'm involved. And that is, that's why I developed that software program. I'll be doing that later, not now. Which effectively does that and breaks it down so that people can manage their problems themselves in little tiny bits. So we've got equal sections of things being solved on a regular basis, but everything is managed along the way. If we go into the big wide world and ask 1,000 questions of 1,000 people, we're going to get 10 million answers. I can't work with 10 million answers, neither can anybody else, to be honest. And if I'm going into a business to say, right, where are you now and where are you going, and how we're going to ask people to help you change when you don't want to change, because we know that's the problem, then I think giving away the opportunity right from the very start is the way that I would go.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, well, so we're good sort of 30, 35 minutes together. If there's nothing else, a relatively small but highly intelligent group today, we can just sort of close and say thank you. See you next week if you can make it. I really appreciate your interaction and inputs today. Always happy to have a conversation offline, away from this, if useful. But otherwise, I'll close if there's nothing else and say thank you very much. Goodbye. God bless. Farewell. Adieu. Bonne chance. Ciao.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. Bye, Brad, MJ, John. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Vivian. Bye.